under the burning sun of ancient Egypt. Life was ruled not only by kings and queens, but by beings far older, far more powerful, and far more mysterious. The gods. To the people who lived along the Nile, the gods were not distant spirits. They were everywhere, in the flood of the river, in the scorching heat, in the whisper of the desert winds. To speak of Ra, Isis, Horus, or Anubis was not to speak of myth, but forces that shaped every breath of life. Imagine waking each morning, looking east, and believing that the blazing sun was Ra himself, sailing across the sky in his golden boat, fighting a serpent of chaos, so that light would touch the world again. Without his victory, the land would drown in eternal night. That was the reality for Egyptians. They were never alone. Every moment was watched by eyes greater than human. Ra was a supreme force, the father creation, whose light gave order to the universe. But when the day ended, his journey was perilous. In the underworld, he faced Apophis, the monstrous serpent of chaos, who tried each night to devour the sun. Priests told the people that their prayers and rituals gave Ra the strength to win. Without them, dawn would never come. The people believed that even their smallest devotion helped the gods fight back the darkness. Osiris was another figure, without whom Egypt made no sense. He was king of the afterlife, Lord of the dead, but he was also the symbol of rebirth. The Nile flooded every year, bringing fertile soil that allowed crops to grow, and the people saw Osiris in that flood, dying and rising again, giving life to the land. When death came for them, they hoped Osiris would judge them kindly, weighing their hearts against the feather of Maat, the principle of truth and balance. A heart heavy with lies would be devoured by Ammit, a monster with the body of a lion, the head of a crocodile, and the hind legs of a hippopotamus. But a pure heart joined Osiris in paradise. Every Egyptian, rich or poor, carried this belief to their grave. Isis, wife of Osiris, was the most beloved. She was more than a goddess. She was the ultimate mother, healer, and magician. When Osiris was killed by his jealous brother Set, it was Isis who pieced him back together, breathing life into him once more. Egyptians loved her because she was merciful, close, protective. Women prayed to her for children. Sailors prayed for safe journeys, and the sick called out her name for healing. Her temple spread not only across Egypt but far beyond, reaching into Greece and Rome, for her compassion knew no borders. Then came Horus, falcon-headed, the eternal protector of the throne. Every pharaoh claimed to be Horus made flesh, ruling not by human right, but divine destiny. His battles against Set, the god of chaos, mirrored the struggles of kings on earth, fighting to maintain stability in a land where order was fragile. With the sharp eyes of a falcon, Horus saw everything. Nothing escaped him, and his presence meant that the rightful king would always triumph, even if the fight was long and bloody. But when death approached, Egyptians turned not to Horus but to Anubis, the jackal-headed guide of souls. Anubis was not feared but respected. He watched over mummification, preserving bodies for the journey to the afterlife. He led souls to the Hall of Truth, where Osiris judged them. Without Anubis, no Egyptian believed they could cross safely into the next world. He was a silent companion at every funeral, his dark eyes watching, his jackal head unblinking. And then there was Sobuk, the crocodile god, fierce, violent, unpredictable. To Egyptians, crocodiles were both terrifying and sacred. They could kill without warning, yet they were also protectors of the Nile. Sobuk embodied the river itself, giver of life, taker of life. Entire towns, such as Crocodilopolis, built temples in his honor, keeping crocodiles in pools, feeding them as holy creatures. Sobuk was not simply worshipped. He was feared. His presence reminded the people that the Nile was not theirs to command. It belonged to the gods. This entire web of gods and goddesses held Egypt together. They were not merely stories, but explanations for life's greatest mysteries. Why did the sun rise each day? Ra fought and won. Why did the Nile flood? Osiris renewed the land. Why must humans die? To be judged, to join Osiris, or be lost forever. These gods brought order to chaos, giving meaning where none could be found. For the Egyptians, to ignore the gods was unthinkable. Every offering, every temple, every carved inscription was a way of saying, "We understand our place, we honor you, keep balance in our world. But there was a darker side to this devotion. The gods did not only inspire love, they demanded fear, loyalty, and sometimes sacrifice. And in the villages that lined the Nile, tales were whispered to warn the young of what happened when a god's desire turned toward mortals. Among those tales, one of the most haunting was the story of the crocodile bride. Mothers told it to daughters as a warning never to wander by the river at night, for the Nile was not just water, it was Sobek's domain. Long ago near Fayum, where crocodiles thrived and Sobek's temple stood, the people believed the god demanded brides. These were not marriages of joy, but of terror. Priests claimed that to deny Sobek was to bring down his wrath. Floods had destroyed fields, crocodiles had tore apart livestock, and sickness carried by the river. So when the high priest declared that Sobek had chosen a maiden, no one dared question it. That year, it was Nefru, a girl of rare beauty, whose eyes shone like the river at dawn. But Nefru was not merely a maiden of beauty. She was in love with Kame, a young farmer who worked the fields by the Nile. Their love was secret, whispered under palm trees and carried in stolen glances. Yet when the priest announced her fate, her world collapsed. To refuse was to condemn her family and her village. To accept was to abandon her heart. On the appointed night, the moon was full, silver light spilling across the Nile. The villagers gathered on the banks, torches flickering, drums beating in slow rhythm. Nefru was dressed in a white gown, woven with lotus flowers, her wrists heavy with gold bangles. Her eyes searched the crowd for Kame, but he was held back, powerless, trembling in silence. The priests chanted, voices rising with the rustle of the reeds. The water stirred, rippling unnaturally. Then came the sound, low, deep like thunder beneath the waves. From the depths, crocodiles surfaced, their eyes glinting red in the torchlight. At the center, the largest of them all rose, its jaws wide, its body gleaming. The people fell to their knees. Sobek had arrived, but then, before the terrified eyes of the crowd, the crocodile changed. Its body shifted, stretched, and in place of the beast stood a man. Tall, powerful, his skin dark as a Nile mud, his eyes glowing with inhuman fire. He was both terrifying and magnificent, a god in human form. He reached for Nefru. "I have chosen you," Sobek's voice thundered, deep as the river. "Be mine, and I will grant you power beyond your dreams. Refuse, and your lover will be crushed, your people drown in my flood." Nefru trembled, torn between love and fear. The crowd waited, silent, breaths held. Kame struggled against the guards, his cries lost in the chanting. Nefru's heart pounded. She could not betray her love, yet she could not abandon her people. There was once a night when Egypt itself seemed to tremble, a night when the heavens turned silent, and the people feared that the gods had abandoned them. For as long as anyone could remember, the stars had guided every aspect of life. Farmers watched them to know when the Nile would rise. Priests charted their movements to set the dates of holy festivals. Sailors depended on their patterns to find their way along the endless river. The stars were not just lights in the sky. They were the very eyes of the gods, a reminder that divinity was always watching. But then came a night when those eyes closed and the stars disappeared. In the city of Thebes, people first noticed it when twilight deepened. The sun sank, and the familiar glitter of the heavens never came. The sky was not dark in the way of an ordinary night, but heavy, suffocating. A curtain of blackness without even the faintest flicker of light. The moon, too, was hidden. Families stepped out of their houses, staring upward, whispering in dread. Children cried, elders muttered prayers, and priests were quickly summoned. The fear spread like fire. How could the Nile be predicted? How could the seasons be measured if the sky itself had been erased? Some claimed that Nut, the goddess of the sky, had grown angry. They said she had gathered up her star children and hidden them in her body, unwilling to let mortals look upon them. Others whispered that Set, god of chaos, had finally struck a fatal blow against order, swallowing the heavens whole in his rage. To sailors on the Nile, the darkness was unbearable. Without the constellations, their boats would be lost. They tied themselves to the banks, refusing to sail. For farmers, it was a curse. For without the rising star Sirius, they could not know when the Nile would flood. The absence of stars was not simply curiosity. It was a disaster. The priests of Ammonius assembled in the great temple. They lit fires, their flames quivering as though even they feared the dark. One of them, a young priest named Menachab, spoke with voice steadier than he felt. He told the people that this was not the end, but a test. The gods had turned away because humanity had grown careless. Their temples had been neglected, their names not spoken enough in prayer. If the people wanted the stars to return, they must show devotion like never before. Word spread quickly. That night, thousands gathered along the avenues and courtyards of Thebes. Torches blazed, casting long shadows, as priests lifted their arms to the heavens and called upon Ra, Nut, Isis, and Osiris. Offerings poured in bread, beer, flowers. Even jewels lay at the feet of statues. Mothers carried their children forward, whispering prayers for safety. Sailors beat drums to mimic the sound of the river's heartbeat. Farmers raised baskets of grain toward the empty sky. For once, the entire city, from slave to noble, stood together, united in fear and faith. The chanting rose into a thunderous wave. Menachab declared that the gods would see this act of unity, that Nut would release her star children, that order would be restored. As hours dragged by, some began to despair. The sky remained empty, black and endless. Yet the people did not stop. They sang until their voices cracked, their throats raw with smoke and prayer. They refused to let silence win. Then, just before dawn, the miracle began. A single point of light pierced the darkness, faint at first, then brighter. Another followed, and then another, until the heavens blossomed with thousands of glittering stars. Gasps and cries erupted. Mothers held their children close. Sailors wept openly. Priests fell to their knees in gratitude. It was as if Nut herself had relented, parting her body once more to reveal her children. The people believed their devotion had moved the gods, that their unity had saved Egypt. When the sun rose that morning, it was met with cheers louder than any festival. The stars slowly faded in the daylight, but the memory of their absence burned deep. Never again would the people take them for granted. To them, this was not a natural event, but a divine warning. The stars could vanish if the gods willed it, and only through devotion could they shine again. Historians who came later would argue it might have been a dust storm from the desert, a rare eclipse, or some unusual weather that had hidden the sky. But to the Egyptians who lived it, explanation did not matter. What mattered was a lesson. Faith must never falter, for the gods watched always, and their gifts could be taken away in an instant. The tale of the night, the stars had spread across villages and temples, carried in songs and carved into stories. It became a symbol of loyalty, a reminder that even in the darkest times, unity could call the light back. Parents told their children that the stars were fragile, and only the love of people kept them in the sky. Priests used the story as proof that devotion had power, that gods responded to the cries of mortals. For centuries, the legend lingered, shaping how Egyptians saw their place in the world. Fragile humans, yet with voices strong enough to reach the heavens. The Egyptians lived in a world where the divine was everywhere. The sun was a god, the river was a god, the earth beneath their feet breathed with the will of gods. The story of the vanished stars was more than a myth. It was a reflection of their belief that life itself was balance, a constant struggle against chaos. And if chaos could swallow the heavens once, it could do so again unless mortals remained faithful. From the blazing sun of Ra, to the judgment of Osiris, to the compassion of Isis, to the sharp eyes of Horus, and the lurking presence of Sobek in the Nile, the gods defined every beat of an Egyptian's heart. Their myths were not simply entertainment. They were survival, a way to understand why crops grew, why the river flooded, why death came, and why light returned. To them, the stars were not distant fire. They were a covenant, a reminder that order would endure, so long as faith endured with it. And so the people of Egypt learned to live not only with awe but with humility. They knew the gods were near, sometimes merciful, sometimes cruel, but always present. The night the stars had became one more chapter in their endless dialogue with the divine. And as we look back across the sands of time, it reminds us that humanity has always sought meaning in mystery, always searched for light in the darkness, and always raised its eyes to the heavens, hoping the gods were still watching.